Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, where you learn about what's happening in the greater East Bay. I am your host, Jared Asch. Today, we are going to learn about special districts, government agencies in California that operate different from cities and counties. They govern our water, our transportation, our sewer, our sanitation, and a whole lot of other things in between. Today, I am joined by Dan Muelrath from the Diablo Water District. He is also the current chair of the Contra Costa Special Districts Association. That is not one I could say 5 times fast, but welcome, Dan, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me here today. Those are all mouthfuls, and we have acronyms for every single one of those.
Tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got to these two positions today.
Good. If we go back in the Wayback Time Machine, I always like to give a shout out to my college days, to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. That gave me the foundation and footing to really get into the government realm. I got a bachelor's degree there in agricultural business, concentrated in policy, and had a minor in water science. At the time, I never knew that my minor was going to be where I changed my entire career, but it was. While I was also there, I also got my MBA with an emphasis in finance. All that kind of stacked on the academic side to lead me to where I am today. But let's just say when I graduated from there 22 years ago, I had no clue that this industry existed, where I'd land, what I would do in life. It's definitely been a journey. I've been in a few different water districts or full service cities throughout my career. My first water district experience was at Marin Municipal Water District, and just cut my teeth there, doing plan reviews and such. Then went to Santa Rosa Water. They're actually part of the full service city for the city of Santa Rosa. Then got my first role as general manager at Valley of the Moon Water District, which is in the Sonoma Valley. And then 6.5 years ago already, I've been here at Diablo Water District as the general manager. That's a quick flyover of how I physically got here, but yeah, open to any other questions.
What is a special district here in California? And let's first define what it is, give an example or two, and then we could talk a little bit more about the association there.
Yeah, as you alluded to in the intro, that special districts typically do something that a full service city or a neighboring city may or may not do. In our East Bay area, in the far East Bay, there's cities out here that are full service that do water, sewer, but they might not do vector control, mosquito vector control. That is a special district. There's other municipalities that are not per se full service. And let's say that there was water or sanitary needs before the city was incorporated. That's the case here at Diablo Water District. We've been around for over 70 years. And the actual town of Oakley that makes up the majority of our area has a significantly shorter. That's why we end up with special districts that may exist where a full service city already is. Or you may end up with something like East Bay MUD, East Bay Municipal Utilities District. This spans multiple jurisdictions. You typically will find it more in these specialty areas. And there's water, there's sewer, it could be police districts, fire districts, cemetery districts, reclamation districts. We have members almost in every category of that in the Contra Costa Special District Association.
How many members are in the Special Districts Association in Contra Costa?
Yeah, we have right about 25 members. It makes up all the larger special districts that the public would think of or the public would interface with, whether you are going to East Bay Regional Parks, whether it's East Bay Municipal Water District or Utility District, or it's your local water purveyor, Contra Costa Water District on the wholesale level. And then you get down some of the ones that we don't tend to have as members, small reclamation districts, which are in charge of keeping water off of small islands or small plots of land that have some sort of levee or pump protection, that maybe there's only 1 or 2 or 10 people that benefit from that reclamation district. But we do have the major reclamation districts are part of our association.
Interesting. And is it just that they're so small, they don't see the benefit of the association?
Yeah. When we look at this last couple of years with CCSDA, so that'll be an acronym to get us through it quicker, with Contra Costa Special District Association, we have been doing a membership drive, trying to add value where we can to these other special districts. And you hit it right on it. Some of these reclamation districts are so small that they are landowner driven. And like we said, there may be only a couple landowners that are beneficiaries of the reclamation district. And so they don't have a need or an interest in joining together, learning what's happening at the state level, partner with other agencies on projects, because they're literally just small volunteer driven boards that they have.
And does the CCSDA,
Yep.
does that have staff?
Staff is a loose way to put it. We have volunteers from member organizations. Right now, you have myself presiding as the president. We have Dan Muelrath. She is vice president from Iron Out Sanitary District. And then we have one other board member at large, Mike McGill from Central Sanitary District. And then we currently have a vacancy on the executive committee. And then we also have our administrative support, Shelby, who is also with Diablo Water District. It is a member-ran organization. There's no extra pay, no extra anything. It's something that we believe in. And we believe in being partners with our neighboring agencies. We rotate the presidency every so often. I've been at it now for 2 years. I got a few more years before we rotate it to somebody else.
A lot to keep track of for a volunteer organization. And I'm glad to know it's fun, because it's been a while since somebody's come on and said, hey, do this because it's fun.
Yeah.
That culture matters. Tell us, what is the association? Is it tracking state legislation? Is it tracking regulatory? Because your agencies are so different. The regulations the water agency has are different than even the wastewater are different, definitely, than the cemetery side of the equation. So tell us a little bit about, what does the association do? How does it keep track of some of those regulations and help its members?
Yeah. It's important to know that the Contra Costa Special District Association is a chapter of the California Special District Association. We are the kind of the local aggregation within Contra Costa of special districts, but we do get support from the statewide association. And at our monthly meetings, we will have somebody that's on staff with the California Special District Association come in and give presentations, legislative updates, what's happening, hot takes, and then we will dive in. If there's something that's specific enough and broad enough that covers our members' good coverage and interest, then we will maybe deep dive into certain topics. I would say 2 years ago, one of the big topics was there was a push to limit how municipalities and special districts were able to raise our revenues to cover our costs. That was something that impacted everybody, whether you're a fire district, sanitary, water. And that's one that we really took deep dives on, hosted roundtable events, had speakers come in from both sides, definitely formed for that. In a quieter legislative cycle, we'll bring in, whether it's banking professionals to just talk about special district finances and how to leverage different tools that they might not have known about. Some of these smaller members at a cemetery district may only not have any staff to it, have a couple hours a month that they volunteer, but they need this type of information. We provide resources across the board.
Do you have dues with that structure, or because you don't have staff, it's just, hey, pay for we just need everybody to buy a ticket to a dinner, or somebody just offers to chip in for pastries kind of thing?
Combo of all the above. The dues are very low, so $125, maybe $120. Don't quote me exactly, or quote me since we're on the podcast here, but it's
it'll be your words, not mine.
There we go. They're very low for even the organizations that are the mid-size and larger agencies have. And then, yeah, our agency, host agencies, will chip in for the pastries or lunch that we're doing for the day at our meetings. And then we brought it back last year. We're trying to make it an annual event, is our annual dinner. And it's also a fundraising opportunity for CCSDA to help bring in better speakers. Last year at our event, we had a great speaker. It was Mark Abanias, the Bay Area sportscaster, and just talked about building great teams. And that's whether you're a team of 2 or a team of 500. Try to bring that value. We're not a professional development organization, but we want to fill gaps where we can.
No, and that makes sense. And I think people don't realize how some of these agencies work, and some are elected, some are also through city appointments, right? There's the East Bay Emergency Communications Division, which is all the radios for police and everything, and they all chip into one agency to do that. I think there's one staff, but their board is, if I'm not mistaken, is city elected officials that are then appointed into it.
Yeah. And while that is not a specific special district, there are some special districts that have what you call independent boards, which most of us are, where voters elect the board, totally separate from county or city government. And then you have the ones that are dependent that may have appointees that come from municipalities that appointed to the board. In the day, we still operate similar, but as far as who's ultimately responsible to the public, in the independent special district, it's going to be the elected board. They're directly elected by the public and serve at the public will.
What are some of the other topics that come up at the special district meetings in the past couple of years?
Yeah, I'd say that going through the pandemic together was definitely an experience that we all had to leverage each other's experiences. Some of the larger organizations, they felt impacts before the moderates and the small size agencies, and learning from them or vice versa, how to remain nimble, where some of the small to moderate size were able to navigate different things financially, staffing, etc. And the larger organizations were slower to adjust. That was definitely a process that we worked through there during the pandemic. And I would say another item that we have definitely been working with is like citizen engagement. How do we make sure that we're reflecting what our communities want us to be able to provide as far as services that still meet our core functions? We are formed to be a water district. And I know we'll talk about that later as far as my role as a general manager, but there's also certain things the public may want that fits within that, and some things the public may want that doesn't fit within that jurisdiction. But bringing in different speakers, we're able to focus on different technology. Even as they're consulting firms, they're still not there to solicit business. They're there to give thought and to give input to different areas that we could, investigate. And there's one technology we're looking at right now is we do surveys to our citizens, and we do them every couple of years. A lot of districts do this. And if we want to get a quick check-in on a very specific question, or maybe 3 or 4 questions, do we have to wait until our biannual survey? Or is that something that we can jump on and push out to a statistically significant number of customers, get real-time feedback, and avoid the plight of Nextdoor and Facebook by trying to post questions there that you don't get real community responses to?
Yeah, I think Nextdoor is just a trap. It's good to know what's happening in your community, but you could get sucked into long-winded public complaints. Actually engaging those people in person and asking questions is always important too. But sharing just those ideas among agencies is, how are you reacting to something? How are you dealing with this budget issue? Reporting, constituent communications. I think sharing all those ideas is a key reason why you exist. How does Contra Costa Special District Association differ from Alameda, Solano, or even one of the bigger ones that are out there?
Yeah, I'd say then mainly it's the level of membership. We have a pretty good uptake rate, as we talked about earlier on. And we are active as far as our bi-monthly meetings. Some other agencies, or some other chapters, I should say, they're on quarterly, or even in the Sonoma and Napa to the north of us, they just combine their chapters next to struggling and trying to make them of more value. We do partner with Alameda County Special District Association. Once a year, we have a joint meeting. You think the Contra Costa is big enough to get our 25 members together? Sometimes we like to cross-pollinate with our neighboring county. Special districts do overlap into Alameda and Contra Costa, so they're already setting in both realms. But then again, it's also to team up and get additional speakers or overlap areas that we think of. One agency might be too small, Contra Costa might be too small, but when we get Contra Costa and Alameda together, now we're talking significant population, and if it needs to be bigger than that, then we take it up with the Special District Association, the statewide association.
Yeah, that makes sense. And does the state have staff to track legislation and put information together, or how do they work?
Yeah, they do. They have, like you said, the board of the California Special District Association is either GMs or senior staff from local special districts or elected officials. one of the directors from Costa Water District. He's actually on the statewide board for California Special District Association. We do have local representation on the statewide board. But then, yeah, there are also field reps or field region liaisons that cover multiple areas. So there's a handful of those. They have legislative analysis and executive director members presence in Washington, D.C. as well. Impacted us locally, but it's been big at the state and federal level. Is again back to when COVID hit and the stimulus packages were coming out. Those all went to cities and counties. None of that money was available to special districts because by definition, a special district was not in the federal code. And that's what's been being worked on probably the last 3 years, I would say, is getting it codified that a special district at the federal level is recognized as a government agency that's eligible for those types of funds. Definitely the power is when we all come together.
It amplifies the voice. And I'll just emphasize around that. There's 89,000, what I call municipal entities, state, local government entities throughout the country. And people wonder, whoa, how do you get that number of 50 states? Really goes back to those reclamation districts that you're talking. It's every school district, every water, sanitation, cemetery district just adds up after a while. And it's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing that people don't realize too is that a lot of these special districts, they're singular focused, mostly either water or sewer. There's a few that have both or just on rec and parks. And when you have a singular focus, it's a lot easier to be mission driven rather than have the policies of full service city that has to deal with whatever the most recent crime might be or the response times of the fire department, which are the higher level items or tend to be higher level, more public facing than rehabilitation project for a sewer lift station. And it's very easy for those priorities to get shuffled down. We're at a special district. That's our mission critical. And we can tend to move faster and get projects done when we have that real singular focus and don't get distracted by other noise.
Just curious, is that Ernie from Contra Costa Water District who serves on the state board?
Yes.
Yeah, Ernie Alvarez, he did a podcast talking about water with us from Contra Costa Water District about a year ago, talking about where's water going and the abundance and how you deal with droughts. I'll use that as a pivot point. Let's talk about the water district now. Tell us a little bit about your district for those of us that aren't in the greater East County. Tell us, what is your territory? You said mostly Oakley. Tell us a little bit about your organization, and then we'll go from there and talk about water.
Okay. Yeah, we are a mid-sized special district. Original sole focus was just on water, on potable water. And like you said, we serve the Oakley and greater region. We serve also Knightson, portions of Ethel Island, and unincorporated areas to the east of Oakley. I'd say that Oakley makes up about 90% of our service area and customers. But again, it gets back to that we've been around for over 70 years and the town incorporated much more recently. We still exist as a special independent district. And I said in there that we were originally just water, but then in 2014, when the state passed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, we had to respond to that. And in, I think it's about 2017, we also became a sustainable groundwater agency. We have two roles now, providing potable water, but then also making sure that the aquifer does not get depleted as well. Those are our two mission critical items, but within that, we have a lot of initiatives happening, a lot of investment happening within the area here, and tend to push ourselves in the innovative fronts with technology, upgrading infrastructure, hardware, cybersecurity, all the fun stuff that comes with operating a water district.
Now, how are you guys leading on that cutting edge for your district? How is AI and tech shifting?
Yeah, definitely. Probably one of the biggest tech moves that we've done in the last couple of years. It's been a probably 15-year process of upgrading water meters that would be able to digitally report back, provide hourly updates to customers, have a consumer engagement portal that a customer can see their water usage. And about 2 years ago, we finished that project to where customers can now log in. Every customer within our district can log in, set leak alerts, set consumption alerts. If they have something that's leaking for over 24 hours, they'll get an alert about it. If their average bill is normally $100 and they want to set that as their threshold and they're approaching it, they'll get an alert saying, hey, you're going to exceed your billing threshold. Just really empowering the customers has been our big push. We have close to 15,000 water meters that all come reporting back through 2 data towers. And then it gets analyzed on a daily basis on the back end. It gets analyzed, and our customer service staff will review if maybe somebody didn't sign up for a leak alert, but they're using 5 times the amount of water they normally do. We'd rather, when we can, jump in and call that customer and say, hey, we know you're not signed up for the leak alert, but you have this leak going on. And try to work with them then, rather than a month later when they get the bill and it's something that's outrageous and they can't fathom.
Yeah, that leak detection is great. This goes back like 15 years, but I worked for some companies that were selling like a homing beacon that you could drop into pipes and they could detect leaks. And this was in a couple of 100-plus-year-old cities in the Northeast. And they said, look, the problem is we know we have leaks. These pipes are over 100 years old. If we know about them publicly, though, that's not good, because then we have to fix them. We don't have the money for that. And we make profit by selling more water to people. We're making money by selling for those leaks. I thought that was interesting. I also think times have changed over the last 15 years with more awareness. And that was, again, in the Northeast and Midwest. I had that issue. I don't see that today in California.
Yeah. And that's definitely what we hear when it comes to East Coast, West Coast, is that you got 2 parts of the system. You have the distribution system, which the utility owns, then you have the customer side of the meter in their house. And on the customer side, yeah, that's if we tell them that they have a leak and then they bring it back down to normal. Yes, that is revenue that could have come into the district, but it's also revenue that we did not budget. We don't budget for Jared to have a leak at his house and us to get an extra $1,000. That's outside of our plans. We'd rather notify the customer, let them fix it. But then on the utility side, we definitely still have a difference of East Coast, West Coast, where East Coast, it might be more expensive to actually repair that leak than it is just to let the water keep going out of the distribution system through whatever crack or break it might have. Where here on the West Coast, that's definitely not allowable for multiple reasons. One is cost, because water costs more on the West Coast from the wholesale side of things, the water we buy put into our system. And then you also just have your regulatory environment that's totally different. And we can only have much water that's considered leak or non-revenue water. The state regulates us on those items.
One of the things that I've noticed is when the drought restrictions come back, which now we're not in a drought year. When the drought restrictions come back, it's based generally on my previous year's usage, right? Oh, you got to save 10% based on your usage. Why this year would I not want to up my water usage by 10%? Not me, for a friend. So that when I have to cut it, I'm not really cutting it this year. Maybe overwatering my trees or taking a slightly longer shower. Next year, I'll take a slightly shorter shower. How does that work from a water saving perspective, from a financial model? Can you give me some insight on that?
Yeah. And when you hit the nail on the head, it's the messaging behind conservation, whether it be a single year or long term. Conservation to me is you're in a drought, you need to conserve right then and there. Water efficiency is just about these small changes you make over time at your house that you don't notice as a customer. If I take your shower head down from 2.5 gallons per minute to 2 gallons a minute and it's highly engineered, you probably wouldn't notice. If I say we're in the middle of the worst drought we've ever had and everybody's restricted to a 1/4 gallon per minute on their showers, everybody's going to complain. The water use efficiency is just small, steady changes over time that the consumer doesn't really notice any end-use impact. But when you get into the conservation, we don't disagree that customers, yeah, if you have to go and let your lawn brown out that year, or you're deciding to change your habits within the household, we know it's going to have a customer impact. We don't want that either. We want to provide a product that provides the need that the customer wants. The state has finally gotten away from just looking at these outright 10%, 20% year over year cuts to us as water retailers, water purveyors. They're now, a lot of it's based off of gallons per capita per day. And if you were already using, let's say you're efficient, you're using in the wintertime, you're at 55 gallons per person per day, relatively efficient house. But your neighbor next door is using 200 gallons per day per person in the winter. As a water retailer, and this is again specific to the Diablo Water District, we would be more reaching out to your neighbor saying, hey, we think there's a little bit more you can do over there. We're not going to reach out to you that's already efficient and say, do even more. Because we're about making sure that everything is equitable as well, that you shouldn't have to do more if you've already done it. That's kind of our plea to don't just develop your use this year so you have a higher base, because you're going to pay more to have that higher base just in case if we have a drought next year.
And I get what you're saying is, right, I've already at home transitioned a whole bunch of landscaping to reduce my need for as much water. And we've installed better sprinkler systems to make it more efficient. In the meantime, my neighbor has planted more grass than ever before. Their water use goes up comparatively to mine. It makes sense that you're talking to them. And I also notice my office is in an area that has a large amount of grass that is constantly watered. And I would love to see that landscape change, but you have difference between people who pay the water bills, people who who are the property owners that would manage that landscaping kind of thing, tenants. It's all different. There's a gas station on the corner here that has grass that they water, and they water half the street, which drives me crazy. How do you work as a water district to change those?
Yes, I mean, us locally and on the waterfront, a lot of water retailers have programs to help incentivize a customer to replace along with a more California-friendly garden. And there is a financial incentive on the upfront. Then they also have built in the pricing signals within your rate structures that are allowed that show that if it costs more for us to procure more water, then the more you irrigate, you might go up from tier 1 water use to tier 2 water use or to tier 3 water use. We have a few different tools there, but the overarching one that's been dabbled in but is coming down is the state approach and the statewide adopting regulations that in the last drought that non-functional turfs at a commercial setting cannot be irrigated unless it's recycled water. That's also can create enforcement issues in between the water district, who is not the land use authority, and the local county or city, who is the land use authority, who enforces you can't irrigate the non-functional turf areas. But I see the state ratcheting more and more into that area as we move the next few years forward, and prior to the next drought, whenever that does come, they will continue to ratchet that valve.
Is that something that's starting to roll out now where somebody should be starting to enforce that? Or is that just on the horizon and the state is going through that process?
I'd say being that specific about the kind of commercial non-functional turf, the outright approach of thou shalt not, it's really in the times of drought. You can't irrigate, but as a water purveyor, we're getting regulated by the state on how much we're allowed to sell within our service area, how much water we're allowed to sell. And the state has come in and assigned each one of our customers essentially a water budget or how much water they should be using. And even though we don't regulate it down to the per customer, we're responsible that when we take all of our 15,000 connections or 45,000 people plus businesses together, that we have to meet a certain budget or a certain allocation that the state sets. And that number is getting lower and lower. That could be up to each individual retailer to figure out how you're going to go implement it. Or if you happen to meet it globally without having to go to your business park or the gas station and say, thou shalt not do that. We always like to do it together rather than individual targets.
Take your district for an example. How much do you expect in the next 7 to 10 years do you have to reduce your allotment by?
Under the current numbers, we're meeting it currently, and we meet the first additional target of 2030, which is to get down to, it's 47.5 gallons per capita per day on a residential level. That's for indoor water use. And then there's a standard that the state is applying for outdoor. Essentially, you can't have turf everywhere, whether you're a residence or a commercial. You have to have a balance, some turf where you're going to use it, presumably be in your backyard, playing sports, whatnot. City parks will still have their sports fields. Recycled water is an exemption route, but just the adage of every new home going in has turf in the front yard, that's been gone now for probably at least 5+ years. The front yards are getting developed with low water use, California friendly landscapes.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Move the grass all to the backyards. It was more play space for the kids versus in the front where we could still make it look good. And you got to do, if you're redoing your front, remember you got to be fire safe too and move some of that landscaping away from your house.
Yep.
That makes sense. What are some other big things that you will do? What are some of the other big things you're looking at doing in your area or you're hearing others do to reduce that overall usage?
Yeah, we definitely want to be accountable to ourselves and transparent to our customers that our pipes, we have 175 miles of pipe in the ground just serving, our jurisdiction. You add all the others in Contra Costa together, and I'm sure we have thousands and thousands of miles of water under streets and such. But we're being accountable by continuing to reduce our water that may be leaking from our pipes. As you mentioned, that your previous experiences of dropping kind of the ultrasonic kind of basketball into the pipes and letting it travel through them and see if there's pipes in the distribution system. All of our pipes are big enough to be able to run something like that through it. We actually have correlators that we go out and set on different valves in the streets. And then they listen for any sound in the pipes. And then the good thing about water when it leaks is it will make a vibration, which makes a sound. And so these correlators can pick up that sound and they can actually say, between this correlator and this correlator, we think the leak is 100 feet from this way, 500 feet from this way. And then we can go out and do more pinpointing of where that leak might be. That's definitely an initiative that we're doing. We go through about 20% of our system every year. Every 5 years, we've gone through our entire system. There's always leaks. There's always breaks. If it surfaces to the surface and we know it, we're on it. Just this last week, we've probably had 3 different leaks that our maintenance and construction crew hops on within less than an hour. They're out there already diagnosing what we do next and getting them fixed because we know the value of non-revenue water, which is what the industry calls water that does not go through the water meter.
Let's look at the overall bigger picture with water too. There's the state's trying to build one new reservoir. Talk to us about supply. You can't make it rain. How do we get more water into the system? We've been talking about efficiency and effectiveness, use, technology. How do we get more water into the system?
Okay. Just from the big picture again, through Diablo Water District's lens, is the headwaters or water that actually ends up in our service area is actually up around Lake Shasta. You're over 150 miles away where the water that we ultimately end up serving out the customer's meter, faucet, shower head comes from that far away. Something we tried to instill with our customers too is you're not just paying for what's happening right here in Contra Costa or in the last mile of reaching your pipe. Stuff that we pay for when we pay Contra Costa Water District and we buy the wholesale water is they're buying water from the federal government who is in charge of deltas, levees, dams, everything else. So from a water supply picture, that's the biggest picture for our area. Most of the water from a surface water perspective is Central Valley Project water. It comes down through the Sacramento River, hits the Delta, and then Contra Costa Water District, or in talking the greater Contra Costa area, East Bay Mud, another diverter from the Delta. Then they also have their own reservoirs too. The question of getting more to us from a surface water perspective, I don't really see that happening. What we look for is more resiliency so that in the times of drought or shortages, that we're still able to meet the needs of our customers within the confines of the state regulations. So for us locally, what that means is additional development of our groundwater. So we have a relatively full aquifer here. We're not like the Central Valley where their aquifer is depleting and the ground is actually dropping at the same time. So we have significant water resources stored under us. It's just relatively hard water. So it needs to either be blended with other treated water or it needs its own treatment system. And so from our local perspective, that's the route we're going, is implementing more groundwater and then also implementing and using recycled water more fully.
Some of the criticism has been of water use in the state has been capturing water when it rains, and the amount of water that has flowed through our streets, out to the bay, out to the ocean, that we just never captured in the system when we desperately need to capture that. Any thoughts on that? Can you explain that from that big picture side?
I mean, you start getting into kind of statewide politics at that point of why the state hasn't built reservoirs, and the one that you were talking about, the Sites Reservoir. Those funds were passed in 2024 through one of the state bond measures, and it still hasn't broken ground yet. 11 years later, and they're still working through their environmental process, still getting ready to break ground out there. I think from a resident of California, it's just hard to see that something got passed and then did not get implemented, or that it's going to be implemented, but it's still another 10 years down the road. That's where I definitely get the frustration on the statewide level. Why not build more reservoirs? They've looked at up in Auburn, building reservoirs up there, but then it's on the fault line. They get concerned there. There was the Los Vaqueros project that was going to be an expansion project that fairly recently went away. We were not part of that joint powers authority that was looking at building that. I can't really get into the details on that one, but there is just this, it's harder to build stuff now than it historically had been. And that's why when Diablo Water District looks at it, whatever we can control locally, the more that we can actually achieve. If I can develop another 2 million gallons of groundwater or reuse another 2 million gallons of recycled water, that's definitely within our ability to do, rather than trying to buy into some statewide project that may happen, may not happen, and get our allocations that way. Locally accountable, faster, more nimble, mission focused.
And there's a perfect tie-in and a great way to end. I'll ask for one consumer tip. What's one water tip you want to give everybody before you leave here?
We got a library of hundreds.
What's the best and something that stands out to you?
Yeah, the largest use of water use throughout the course of a year is still irrigation. And you're used to the water that you see when you wash your hands, but the water that's outside that you don't touch goes off at 4 in the morning, might run down the sidewalk, might not. That's still your biggest water use. And we encourage that customers are either very diligent, adjust their controllers frequently, or that they adopt the smart controllers, which will actually adjust your irrigation based off of the local weather.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate this. I like being able to talk about two topics and really tap into your expertise. Dan Muelrath from Diablo Water and the president of the board for the Contra Costa Special Districts Association, CCSDA. I appreciate your time.
One of our big pushes here at Diablo Water District is our sustainability initiatives. We talked about earlier, what is your mission? Our mission is to provide clean, potable water and also to make sure that the groundwater aquifer remains sustainable. But we find that we can do that and still have sustainable practices. Our biggest kind of push out there is that we're going to be carbon neutral by the end of 2027. And what that means is that we're going through and installing solar systems. The building I'm setting in is 100% solar powered. Our new corporation yard is 100% solar powered. Putting in another solar system up by our reservoirs. We've switched over our diesel fleet to renewable diesel. We're switching some of the gas fleet to electric vehicles as much as we can. We're really committed to that front end, as we know that there's weather variability. We want to do our part, that we are thinking much longer term than just how do we be resilient today, or how do we stop issues in the future and be resilient in the long term.
No, I appreciate that. You're looking to be a leader all around. There's a lot of state mandates, particularly around the vehicle fleets of agencies to go zero emissions. Are you finding you're able to get the vehicles that you need for your type of work? Are you struggling with that? Is that out there?
Yeah, a lot of the utilities, cities, counties are all running the same thing, that there aren't vehicles out there to meet what you'll call your heavier duty needs. For the typical customer out on the street, they might drive a Ford or drive a Chevy. Anything that needs 3/4 ton or 1 ton and above really isn't out there in the market. So when we talk about going to an EV on the trucks, you're talking the half-ton trucks, the ones that
Yeah.
run service tags, maybe have a valve key on them. We're not talking about the dump trucks, the backhoes, all those we switched over to renewable diesel.
Mm.
And so that's how we can reduce our carbon emissions from it, because that oil's already been pulled out of the earth. It's already been used once, been refined back into diesel. That's one way that we're tackling that. But we see it being a ways out until there's anything in the real true heavy duty market of dump trucks and such. You can get some semis that are, but still they're not either really expensive or they're not upfittable to have service bodies and other things on them.
Yeah.
We stay in touch with the air board on that. Some of our member associations we belong to recently had carve out to some of the water districts to say these are the vehicles that we can't get replacements for, because they're trying to sponsor legislation now to get further exemptions and just make that a little bit easier.
Appreciate your time today. Thank you. Wait, don't leave yet. Hit subscribe. Make sure you get the weekly updates. We have a new episode every Wednesday for stuff happening in the East Bay. In the meantime, follow me on LinkedIn, Jared Asch, or check out our firm where we have a weekly newsletter and blog at Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us today on the Capstone Conversation.